audience.
Exactly.
It's riveting.
Exactly right.
We are just getting one more council member logged in.
Miss Liz, get a haircut, like a little new hairdo. I like.
My home hair cutting skills are just going to new heights, Treg.
Mr. Borden. Thanks, Chris.
Doing a sound check for Councilman Hoagland.
Great.
Councilman Hoagland, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you now. Thank you. How's everybody doing? Good.
Doing good. How about you?
Dandy. Never better.
Council, I will go ahead and call this meeting to order for the record. It is Tuesday, September 22nd at 4:34 p.m. We will begin today's afternoon meeting with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Borden?
Here.
Councilman Cavanagh?
Here.
Councilwoman Perot?
Here.
Councilwoman Strader?
Here?
Councilman Hoagland?
Here.
Councilman Burnt?
Here.
Mayor Simison?
Here. Next item is the adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
I move that we approve the agenda. Second the motion?
I have a motion second to adopt the agenda as published. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Next item is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
I move that we approve the consent agenda for the mayor to sign and for the clerk to attest. Second the motion, Mr. Mayor?
I have a motion second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Moving on to item number 8 is under Department Commission reports. First item up is from our Human Resources and Finance Department, a city benefit recommendation. And I will turn this over to Director Ritchie.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Council. Can everyone hear me? Okay, perfect. Just want to make sure before we get started. So, Mr. Mayor, members of Council, thank you for having Todd and I this afternoon. We are here today. Let me share my screen. to share. Let me know if you can see my screen, please. Thumbs up. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So Todd and I are here today to share with you some benefit recommendations on behalf of the 2020 Compensation Committee. So we're going to talk about high level who those members are, the purpose and scope of the committee's focus this year, the benefit recommendations that we have provided to you in advance of our time together today. We'll be seeking your approval for these recommendations, and then we'll talk about next steps. So here are this year's Compensation Committee members. You'll see that they represent different individuals and departments across the city. There's a total of 7 members this year. The purpose and the scope of the Compensation Committee was to review our current employee benefits outside of the medical, dental, and the vision offerings that we currently have in place for market competitiveness. In addition to that, it also is in alignment with our city's organizational strategies to develop a cost-effective benefit plan. And the summary is there for your review. So a competitive benefit package has become more and more important for prospective employees as well as our current employees. Having a competitive benefit package is key in our ability as an employer to attract and retain talented, high caliber employees to the city. It also provides the city an opportunity to differentiate ourselves as an employer in the Treasure Valley and position ourselves in a competitive way for employment amongst other public sector employers in the area. And through that process, the Compensation Committee reviewed local government agency offerings for each of the benefits listed there for you today. We did provide you more detailed information for each of those benefits for your consideration attached to the council memo that you received for today's meeting. We are seeking your approval today for the recommendations that we've put in front of you to become effective October 1st. And if we receive your approval, then Todd and I will come back with the implementation documents at a future meeting, but no later than October 13th. That would include like the policies and things like that that we would need to bring forward to make these changes effective. And so with that, Todd and I stand for any questions.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
Yeah, thank you very much, Crystal. One of the things I wanted to understand on the vacation leave, certainly it appears at the outset that our vacation accrual is low based on tenure for entry-level workers, but can you walk me through kind of the comparable cities in terms of the maximum of 18 hours per month that would implement? I mean, that I think I figured out, worked out, you know, for a regular 40-hour-a-week employee to like 27 vacation days. And I just wanted to understand how that compares to Boise and some of our surrounding cities.
Certainly. Thank you very much, Councilmember Strader. So in reference to your question, how it relates to Boise, currently Boise's maximum is 16 hours. We're proposing to 18 hours, which would be 2 hours above that, to give us that competitive edge for an overall total compensation package. In addition to that, another local government employer in the area also offers 16 hours per month for their maximum accrual. So we took that under consideration in our recommendation and offered 2 hours above that so that we could have a competitive edge.
Mr. Mayor, quick follow-up.
Councilman Schrader.
And maybe you could walk us through a little bit how long someone would need to be employed here or the equivalent service to get to that full vacation accrual.
Certainly, Councilwoman Strader. I believe I can't see everyone, but I believe Todd has that information and would be happy to share that with you on our behalf.
Sure, I can do that for us, Crystal. So for the maximum, Liz, that you're requesting, it would take the 25th year of employment here you would be able to start obtaining an 18-hour accrual per month. So 25 years for the city of Meridian. I believe the two comparables that Crystal mentioned were 20 years. So it would take us 5 more years to get to our cap, whereas the other two comparables are at 20 years.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hey, Crystal.
Yes.
Another,
Councilman Borton.
oh, sorry. I apologize, Mr. Mayor. Another component of this for the council to, among everything else, I guess, to weigh in on is the 5.4, the education reimbursement. And the current practice is to require that the education sought to be focused on something that relates to the employee's job with the city. And the committee's recommendation was to remove that. Maybe Crystal, you can comment on that and see if council has any questions or concerns with that recommended change.
Certainly. Thank you so much, Councilmember Borton. So yes, the committee is making a recommendation to make a change from current policy. As the Councilmember Borton stated, currently today, the education reimbursement is available for courses taken towards a degree through an accredited institution that are work-related at this point in time. We discussed that we would like to invest in our employees. We want to invest not only in them while they're here with us, but we want to invest in their professional development and growth as well. As long as it is towards a degreed program through an accredited institution, we would be bringing that forward for your consideration so that it doesn't necessarily have to be strictly related to the job that they're in today.
Okay, thanks, Crystal.
You're welcome.
Councilman Burnt.
And to piggyback on Councilman Borton's question in regard to education reimbursement, I noticed that if one requests, if a city employee requests a number that's more than what we have to offer, in the past, it came to us for approval and also the mayor, but I noticed that was only changed to the mayor. Does that have, I guess, multiple questions in regard to that. How often does that happen? And what's the, I guess, what's common practice in regard to how much more would we be willing to pay, or is that a case-by-case basis?
Crystal, would you like me to take this one?
Certainly, Mayor.
Okay. So this is part of the rationale for this is we're changing the time frame in which people can actually do an education reimbursement. Currently, they can come at any point in time. The thought process is what happens once a year, happens before the budget process. So any of these will actually be in the line item section of what council will see. So if there was ever a recommendation for something to be above the 3,000, it would be in that area of the budget for the line item for HR. Now I can only speak to myself, but when we discuss this, the only time that I would ever consider a allocation above 3,000 is there's a person who has been put in place for succession planning, and it's a requirement for that job. So, for example, if Lorelei was going to be the next public works director, and it was determined, but she's got to go get an MBA, and it takes 2 years to do that, and that's the type of situation where I would suggest that we pay more, because we've identified the person, we've identified a requirement for that person to take the position, and it needs to be accelerated, maybe more so than what you would normally do for that. But it would still show up in the budget, and council would see it and would have to approve it as part of the budget process. Just saying, you don't need to come to council to get approval to put it into the budget for consideration. No different than really any other amendment or enhancement. You'll still see it.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burnt.
Makes sense. If I can just make a recommendation of maybe just giving us a heads up so that we're definitely aware that's not something that we we will miss. I guess it's sort of vague in the sense also, you know, I don't just, what that number could be or the potential of that number could be. I mean, if it's substantial, I think that, you know, council should be involved in that discussion, but at the minimum, some type of a heads up so it's not missed in the budget process.
It's easy enough. I really don't expect that this is going to come up, to be honest with you, but it could.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Kavanagh.
your comments about kind of a annual basis of which employees are applying is interesting. I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around the timing of that, because if I recall, this tuition reimbursement, is it part of the base budget on an annual basis?
It is. It shows up in the line item under Human Resources.
So, Mr. Mayor, follow-up.
Councilman Kavanagh.
Does that then come, are we having employees apply then before those base budget meetings?
Yes.
We're talking January, February, March-ish?
It would be in that portion, and if it wasn't in that portion, then it would not be move forward through the budget process.
Okay. Different approach. I'm interested to see how it plays out.
And like I say, to your point, it is a different approach. That's why we also removed the council part, because you're going to see it through the budget process and have final sign-off that way or not.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
quick follow-up for Crystal on that. In the example of an MBA, I've seen that frequently in previous jobs that I've had where a corporation will pay for someone to get an MBA, but then typically there's like a work commitment period where they need to work for that organization or have to pay that back. Is that part of our common practice with those large line items if they come up?
Thank you, Councilwoman Strader. No, at this point in time, the current policy and the proposed policy that you have in front of you would not include any type of work contract or work commitment following the receipt of the MBA.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Pro.
To that end, Crystal, did the committee have conversations about implementing that kind of restriction, and was there a decision not to for any particular reason?
So we did have discussion around this benefit in great detail. And if you look at our 5-year history and utilization of this program, over the 5 years, I will say in 2015, 16, and 17, those that participated in the education reimbursement program, we did not have anyone resign from the city within 12 months of receipt of the reimbursement. If you look at 2018, we had one individual who has left the city after receiving a reimbursement within 12 months. And in 2019 and 2020, we had 2 individuals who have left after receiving that benefit. So our numbers are fairly small at this point in time and historically have shown to be small.
Councilman Kavanagh.
Additional question on the tuition reimbursement for Crystal. Crystal, we've seen this number increase incrementally over the past, I think, 6 to 8 years. And I'm just trying to wrap my head around what's the $3,000 based on? Is that the average cost of tuition at Boise State or ISU or an accredited online program? Is that a median dollar amount? Help me understand why we've settled on 3,000. Go Bengals.
I believe that was Councilmember Kavanagh. I believe, if not, I apologize. It's a little hard to hear. Councilmember Kavanagh, that's an average based on local offerings through municipalities in the local area. Competing against Boise is one of those. They have a benefit that is right up there in that range. Also, I'm looking at my information. It was a direct competitive with Boise. So the federal government allows us to do up to, I think, about $5,000. And so we want to remain fiscally responsible with our dollars. We want to remain competitive with this benefit. It is an attractive benefit that not all municipalities in the local Treasure Valley do offer at this point in time. We are seeing an increase in utilization. We entered into making recommendations to the council to start increasing this benefit to see if we would get more participation within this benefit from our employees. And over the last few years, we've seen that as we've incrementally increased that, being responsible with those recommendations, we are seeing more utilization from our city employees who are looking to develop themselves and achieve that education for themselves and their future.
Mr. Mayor?
And, well, Councilman, if I could just real quick, but just, I think it's important for you all to hear my viewpoint and philosophy. I mean, it doesn't mean it matters, but at least that you are aware. But, you know, I've always taken the position, and Councilman Kavanagh can correct me as someone who I used to supervise, you know, my view is that we are here to help our employees get to where they want to be in life. It's not about necessarily even where to get a job here in the city. But to me, education reimbursement or having people go to school while they're here has a lot of benefits. So long as they're going to school and getting that benefit, they're likely not looking for another job. So we may be retaining an employee. You may call that a retention cost for several years while they're going to school. They're also learning other things that, you know, whether it's critical thinking, learning to read and write better, other aspects that might have a wide range of, as we're asking our employees to be multidisciplinarian in their job and in their functions. It's not always clear what type of skills you might learn through the educational process that have a benefit to the city. You also have no idea what someone might learn that might be contributed back to the city through another job that they would be interested in. Education is a tricky thing. You don't know what the outcome will be. And yes, someone could decide that they're going to go get a degree and leave the city. But hopefully when they go and talk about that, they're going to tell the people where they left about the great place that they worked and how it helped them get a job. And maybe that leads to more people wanting to work for the city. So like I say, to me, this is about the whole employee experience and helping them get to where they're going to be productive for the city or society or anything else. So just so you understand, at least my perspective on the education reimbursement program elements. And Councilman Hoagland.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate that perspective. And that is important, that we're developing the person, that they're gaining an education. We want people to be productive in society. And at the same time, I look at it, this is a benefit that we're providing. It helps us remain competitive to attract good employees and to keep them within the system. And it's to that point that I'm wondering if we don't have some sort of payback within a certain time period of staying within city, are we not receiving the benefit that's mutual? That's the only thing. My previous employer had the same situation where, yes, they would help pay for school, you could get that degree, but if you left within a certain time frame, there would be a percentage paid back, just because it was seen as, we're investing in you, we want investment in us as well. So that's kind of a little bit of a perspective that I think council's thinking about, and but I appreciate that perspective. It's not a bad perspective by any means, but it's just one of those things. How do we make sure that taxpayer dollars are used to the best ability of their taxpayers, and they get a return on that if we're investing in our employees?
Well, to play the devil's advocate, we don't ask for our employees to give us commitments for any other benefit that they receive. You know, if they sell back vacation or other hours, or, you know, I'll bet Percy, if they participate in a Percy match and they get a larger benefit that other employees not to choose. I think you have to look at this as a holistic program. Employees will pick and choose where they participate in our benefits based upon what is in the greatest interest of themselves. And you could have people that go for a full Percy match where other people do not. They get a better financial commitment for that than other people. And we don't ask them to give us a commitment to continue to stay at the city for that. So if you look at all benefits, they're not all equal. They're not all used by everybody at the same time, and they vary throughout our employment body, especially with our collective labor folks. You get different benefits and you get different rewards sometimes, but I don't know that we ask anyone to pay back for any benefit that they receive.
Mr. Mayor.
Council, I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I could give you a little historical background too. When we originally had this program back in the early 2000s when I got here, it was very rarely used. It was very small, very restrictive. The reimbursement was very was basically enough to pay for a class, and that was about it. So it wasn't used very much. So the prior mayor and I talked about trying to expand it to do exactly what you said, Mr. Mayor, create a better avenue and opportunity for our employees and provide some real incentive for that. And we did discuss on reimbursement. And I recognized, and what the council members have said, we have talked about previously. I mean, we are wanting to be responsible to the taxpayers as well. So I understand that. But when you get down to the real brass tacks of it, how are you going to collect it? You're going to have a contract with somebody who leaves, who may not have sufficient amount of money in their last paycheck to pay back that amount, and now you're going to sue them. And the reality is the council in the past has never felt comfortable with that. I think, again, certainly this council can have a different perspective, but the reality of trying to collect it based on some mechanism other than just a reimbursement in a final paycheck is really difficult to do. And when push came to shove and that discussion was had, I think the favor in the past was, as you stated, Mr. Mayor, is this is an investment in our employees and giving them an opportunity. If it provides them a different pathway out of the city, that's fine. Those are the discussions you have in making those decisions to allow it in the first place. But that's kind of where we came from and how we got here.
And just to kind of, I know it's not necessarily a benefit, but when employees go to trainings, we can invest this much money or more in a simple training for an employee. And there's no obligation that they're going to repay those funds for that training that they get, that they may take and leave to go to another city as well. So I think there's all sorts of examples through this process on why the repayment or that is not the right way to go personally, but I'll defer to council if that's something that they think is important to add.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
Yeah, no, I, at least my personal opinion on it is that, you know, $3,000, which would cover a couple of classes at Boise State, is one thing. If we made an exception and we decided to invest an extraordinary amount in someone for them to, for example, go get their MBA, I would expect that they would have that commitment. I just view that magnitude differently. And so that's what I was getting at with my comment. Not necessarily saying that everyone should have an obligation to repay their education reimbursement if it's $3,000, but if we decided to do something much larger than that, then I think that would make sense.
And I can say I could support that because, again, under my scenario, this is someone who's being succession planned to take a specific job with the city when someone else retires. That's the time frame. That's the, you know, at least in my opinion, I mean, I don't want to get into employment law in terms of can you create a contract with somebody for that very specific purpose at a city level, but that's essentially what you would be looking at doing.
And Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
a question probably for Mr. Neri. Is that something that could be negotiated in those situations? Again, they're not going to occur that often, but in that situation, is that something they could negotiate a payback if they're to leave within a period of time? And
Mr. Mayor, members of council, certainly on a one-to-one or one-on-one basis, prior to doing that, that's certainly a conversation that could be had. It's certainly not prohibited. Again, I'd caution, you know, the mayor's scenario is a very spot-on situation. You may have somebody that you plan to move into a higher level, director level position, and you train them and do that, and it's a appointed position, and it's a different mayor sitting in the chair, and they don't want that person, so they leave. Should they pay it back? Probably not at that scenario. So there are probably lots of situations, but having that conversation, I think, up front, feeling comfortable, as the mayor said, on whether it's worth that level of investment beyond what's already offered and can it be done differently, I think all of those can be had at the time. It doesn't have to all be crafted into the policy today. I think the policy is really just to show that level of commitment to employees that we're willing as an organization to invest into those types of programs when they're appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Neri.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Just I think for council's benefit, I'd have some really strong aversion to a case-by-case approach to requiring years of service or months of service for taking advantage of a tuition reimbursement. So I think whatever we do, it needs to be outlined in policy so there aren't any surprises. I've long advocated for tying a tuition reimbursement with a willingness to stay and serve at the city for X amount of time. Something that I benefited from in my career, and I knew that when I applied for tuition reimbursement that there was an expectation of my employer that I would stay for a certain amount of time, and I did that to fulfill that obligation. I know there's a lot of what ifs that we would maybe discourage that, but I think, again, we hire at the city responsible leaders. They know what the expectations are when they apply for a program, and if the expectation is that you're going to stay and serve in our community after receiving that benefit for X amount of time, so be it, or to reimburse the city. I agree with Mr. Neri. We don't like to make it a habit of suing former employees, but we also have policies in place to reimburse the city if technology goes missing or isn't returned at the end of our employment. I would see this as no different. So I guess to summarize, if we want to include some years of service for tuition reimbursement, let's either do it or not, but let's not be somewhere in the middle where we take it on a case-by-case basis. I think that's inappropriate for our employees.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
I view it a little differently because I view it that only the exception would warrant that type of a contract. So like, I'm trying to think of a scenario, like an example, but at least to me, the magnitude's very different. If we decided to invest in an employee for succession planning purposes and pay for an MBA, maybe that could end up totaling $100,000 or something. Hopefully they're not that much these days, but if we did that, that's a huge investment. I just view that as order of magnitude very different. And so that's where I think that type of a contract would be appropriate. But I respect your opinion as well.
Council, any further questions or comments regarding this package of items?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Perot.
I really wanted to wait and hear what my other council members had to say before expressing my thoughts on this. I agree with council members Hoagland and Kabner that there should be an obligation, in my opinion, tied to this on the employee's part, whether that is time served after they've completed the education, or whether there is a compensation or a reimbursement requirement if they leave, or I'm comfortable with leaving the, if we don't go that direction, I'm comfortable with leaving the requirement that the subject of the education be somewhat tied to the employee's job duties. And it could be something general, that it doesn't necessarily have to be something very specific, but not in, not in a completely different industry. So I can't say, the reason I haven't suggested any particular thing is that I think each one of those considerations are valid, but I really would like to see some sort of tie for the employee, whether it's time served again, or reimbursement requirement or something. I'd be a lot more comfortable. And I don't see this benefit as the same as the other benefits that are offered to an employee. I just don't. I understand I understand the line of thinking in that regard, but I would say that I think this is something that a lot of employers don't provide, and I think it's great. I'm all in favor of doing it. I just think that there should be some sort of requirement on the employee's part.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Borton.
Kind of taking a step back from the committee's work on this particular issue and the other ones, For a little context, there really was some great diversity of opinion on each and every one of these, talking pros and cons and some of the unintended consequences of including a limitation or excluding it. And there's lots of different perspectives, all of which are valid, and none of them are particularly right or wrong necessarily. And this is one of those examples. I think the committee recommendation with this particular language that didn't have any payback provisions, it also, at least to me, seemed supportive of the concept that if an individual wants to leave the city of Meridian for a particular reason, that's not, against their will, it's not a family move, it's not of their choosing, but they leave and they take their education, that our focus would be more concerned on what's making them leave and what about the environment at the city causes them to be unhappy and to seek employment elsewhere. We haven't had a history of that, and to sort of leave it open-ended and invite an employee who wants to, in this case, get an educational reimbursement, and then should they choose to leave 2 months later, my question would be not how do we get the money back, but what is it about our work environment that caused that employee to leave? $2,000-3,000 is a big deal, but there might be a bigger concern to try and understand why that individual would leave. So I think one reason not to include any strings to stick around after a reimbursement is to invite employees, to the mayor's point, you want to improve you as a person. And boy, if you get some education reimbursement from the city and then you leave the city, take that benefit with you, we got to understand why is it that our employees might not be happy. I don't think this is something that folks are going to strategically try to abuse by any stretch. I don't think that's anyone's suggestion, but I think that would be more of our focus rather than trying to get the money back. And because we haven't had any problem with it at all, it may be one-off, quite frankly, then leave it open for the employees to know that we have trust in how and why they utilize this benefit, and that we provide it because we want them to be a long-term member of our team and give them every opportunity to choose to do so. So that's some of the thought process of why I think both answers are right, but I think there might have been some consideration leaning more towards leaving it open-ended and see what happens.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Yeah, I think this is a very complicated issue. I think what Mr. Neri has pointed out, there's a lot to this, but I think Councilman Strader brings up a good point about for those larger contracts, if you will, of reimbursement, that is more involved. Yeah, the $3,000, I'm glad people are getting educated and they can do better where City of Meridian or elsewhere. One perspective is, after a few years, once I'm on Social Security, I get everything back. They're going to be paying my Social Security. So be educated, get a great job, keep my Social Security checks coming, I guess, when that time comes. But for the other types of things, I would like to see the compensation committee for next year, because this is an annual thing, I understand, is to just kind of take a review of this and look at it a little closer and just check what some of our major employers are doing in the Valley, because those are some of the competitors as well. And they offer it, and who knows, they probably offer even better benefits. I'm not sure for that area, but and if so, we need to know. But knowing that this is a complicated issue, or there's a lot involved in constructing something like that, in the off chance that someone is going to be getting a major degree, maybe we just can have that looked at a little closer next year.
And from my perspective, if you want to remove that altogether from the program, I've done what I can in working with Crystal to remove what I call mayor's exceptions throughout everywhere I can in human resources world. It's nice to have a process if necessary that's defined in case there is that one-off, but it's not my intention. I don't want us to get hung up on the larger issue, and I can commit to not doing it for the next year and allow the committee to look at it during that time frame. We are an ongoing committee over this next year. We've got a lot of work to continue to do. So.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
procedurally, if you got direction from the council to proceed as presented, what are the next steps?
I will turn this up to our two co-chairs of this committee for next steps, how that works, and procedurally what is necessary.
Thank you, Robert, or thank you, Mayor. Joe, could you repeat the question? Next steps, give if the package that we're presenting to you today is approved?
Sure. Yeah, if you were to get council direction, whether if something changes or let's say nothing changes as presented, understanding there's continual work, the process and review of these probably never ends, quite frankly, nor should it. But if today the council says, let's move forward as presented with the recommendations, what happens next? What do you need from the council, and then what's next?
So then we would need to bring back to the council, excuse me, the updated policies and procedures that would support the recommendations and approvals that you would be providing today. And we would be looking to do that at our earliest available council meeting agenda, but no later than October 13th, so that we can make everything effective, implemented, supported by policy, and communicated out to our employees during the month of October before the first payroll.
Okay. Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Borton.
Oh, just one last comment. It's just from viewing some of the committee of the work, it's just, I can't stress enough how important the credibility and validity of the output comes from the discussion of the folks that were involved. Some of you might have served on this committee before in previous years, but Crystal and Todd and the crew really did a good job in focusing on what the council has wanted to focus on, is taking care of our employees in the right way, in diverse and creative ways, and addressing any problems that might have been unintended to improve those. So this seems to be a good byproduct of those efforts, and for the right reason as well. So hats off to the two chairs there.
Agreed. Thank you. So do we need to take a motion or direction at this point in time, or Todd and Crystal, do you feel like you have what you need to move forward?
Mr. Mayor, I believe, again, I think we have enough direction. I think we can work with the legal department and draft up the information for the next available council meeting for you guys to make these official in action. And then Crystal and I will develop the operational administration guidelines to deploy this starting in our October paycheck.
As well as the employee communication as in addition to that.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Borton.
Well, I just wanted to make sure if there were any lingering questions. It wasn't trying to cut off any more conversation, but if making sure council as a whole is on board with these, or if there's something else, if any, that caused concern.
Mr. Mayor.
That's where I was going to ask the council president, Councilwoman Perot.
I don't have any more questions. I wanted to say that all in all, I think that these proposed changes are fantastic. I really was just reading through this and very impressed with how well thought out they were. So like Councilman Borton had said, thank you to the committee for all of your hard work on this, because I really think that these changes are fantastic for our employees and employee retention in the current environment that we're in, with families needing a little bit of extra time here and there to figure things out. So thank you. I think the Those changes are great.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
I agree with that. Overall, I'm supportive of the changes. I think it's moving in a positive direction. And I like how we're trying to position ourselves. We may not pay top of the range compared to every city out there in our competitive set, but we're going to take great care of our employees. And I think having that quality of life as part of the whole package of working for Meridian makes a lot of sense. So thanks for everybody's hard work on it.
Council, any further comments? Okay. Thank you both.
Good job.
I do see we have Mr. Kuntz on the line. So with that, Council, we'll move on to item number 9, the Mayor's Office Strategic Plan Framework discussion. And I'll turn this over to Mr. Kuntz.
Yeah, I see my screen.
Yep.
Okay. It's the first doing a presentation on Zoom, so give me just a second here. All right. All right, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm here to present our 2021 strategic plan framework for the City of Meridian. I'll be discussing with you today what I need from council, what our framework will be, how we've integrated some of our citizen feedback, answer any questions on, yep. Somebody say something? Okay. Answer any questions and gain clarity on certain topics, and then gain approval of the strategic framework. So why are we using a framework? Well, this is an umbrella of our priorities to our citizens, our staff, and external stakeholders. It'll provide an external and internal platform for us to measure success and provide accountability and transparency to our citizens. Sorry. It will, from our previous strategic plan also, our directors and our departments told us that they needed more flexibility in order to create strategies and tactics to complete a new plan. That was something that was clear from talking with them. In this new plan, we're going to provide a clear, action-oriented stretch plan to help achieve our city and our community's priorities. When this plan is executed, we'll have to tell our story, achieve results, and be honest with where we're going. And this plan honestly is a call to action. It's to achieve our vision for the community. This plan also helps define what we are and what we are about when it comes to being a premier community. Actually just saw in Money Magazine that we're number 3 for like the best place to live. So I'll just throw that out there. That just came out. But yeah, and what do I need from council? Well, I need some feedback. And I've gotten some of that so far. It's been good, both from the conversations over the last 9 months and in discussing the framework with you one-on-one. I'm encouraged by what I've heard so far. You know, some of you had a few thoughts and a few suggestions. You had a chance to provide input previously on all of the initial vision, mission, and focus areas. So most of this presentation is going to align with the goals that we have set out. And really the overarching question is, are you comfortable with them so we can move forward in the strategic planning process? I know some of you have had some questions on a couple of the topics in the plan, and we'll have time at the end to weigh in further and respond on some of those, and hopefully adoption. So these goal statements that were created in your packet are the high level synthesized priorities from our leadership conversations. We combined key themes, priorities, and action items to create this. This framework's approval will help set the strategies, the action items, the budget requests, and the direction that we're headed over the next 1 to 5 years. So that's kind of what I need from council in a nutshell. So we'll move on. So what have we done to date? So I took a really in-depth review of the prior plan. It was a good plan. It was our first to give a shot with, and we got a lot of things done. I'll be providing you guys with a final report on that in December, but it had a few missing pieces. It was missing some rigid objectives and tactics that weren't developed by the departments. They required to be rewritten or eliminated every year. We lacked a public-facing or more community-focused strategic plan. Limited staff members were involved in the development and the execution of the plan. You know, broadly speaking, the old plan and most of the vision, mission, and focus areas contain elements of the previous plan. Much of the work we're doing from a high level will continue, but there are a few tweaks and changes and modifications in this new plan from the previous plan, but some of it will carry over. But there were some areas in the previous plan that we've heard through citizen feedback and other feedback from our community that there are issues that need to be addressed in this new plan. And so our leadership helped build consensus and developed action items in order to achieve that. Now, in order to achieve the new plan, we met over a series of months, both pre and post COVID, to develop key themes in our new strategic plan. I would have preferred to meet in a bunch of rooms with Post-it notes and talk to you guys about ideas, but some of that got that got shot. So we are where we are. So over the last 9 months, we asked what was feasible, what's achievable, met with the leadership team, city council to take ideas and turn them into that higher level focus area. Our strategic framework, which you have before you tonight, includes our internal information from our internal subject matter experts, our leadership team, and elements from our survey, our citizen survey, to create a concise framework of focus areas and goals. So this plan, like I said, took elements gathered from our comprehensive plan, as well as the recently completed community survey, and additionally took information from what mayoral and council candidates heard when they ran for office last cycle. And we've integrated some of that information into our plan. From the citizen survey, Dave talked to you about that a couple of weeks ago. It was clear what areas should receive attention from city leadership over the next 5 years: roads, schools, and growth. Now, the citizen survey is definitely a barometer, and we'll continue to get feedback on a variety of these topics in our strategic plan. In a way, the citizen survey is kind of that report card for how we're doing with our community, and we wanted to make sure the citizen survey had a place in that strategic plan. So we asked for their feedback every 3 years. So we wanted to make sure their goals are our goals, strategies, and action items that are in the plan would be aligned with those questions, so we can improve those outcomes of response from our community. Really, the question is, what can we do in some of these areas? What is possible? It might be easy to say we don't control some of these areas, like schools and roads, for instance. However, we've got to come up with strategies in these areas to stretch the organization and deliver on these topics. So again, some of this stuff's going to be review, but our vision, it remains unchanged from being the West premier community to live, work, and raise a family. On this, I've included the citizen scorecard, report card pieces as a place to raise a family, place to live, and a place to work. I'm not going to cover those metrics in depth because again, this is mainly a review, but this is that vision. We still have a ways to go. It's a point out in time, but it's that place we want to be. That's what that vision is. Our mission, this is kind of how we do business, right? So the mission of our organization, again, this kind of said that we added a little bit of language on this when we tweaked it slightly, added a little bit from the comprehensive plan, tells us broadly how they're doing business, but the mission is that how we do business, how we go about doing things for our organization. So a little visual on how our focus areas, our measures, and our goals work with this new strategic plan. The focus areas are kind of that broad 90,000 foot definition of what our priorities are as a city. The survey metrics or other indicators underneath that illustrate the impact to our citizens. And the goals are the actions and outcomes related to those focus areas. And this kind of helps broadly define our strategic framework, providing that clarity, the simplicity and the transparency to our, like I said, to our citizens, to our community, and to our employees and our leadership. So the first focus area deals with responsible growth. And as we saw in the citizen survey, it was one of the top areas that that our citizens felt like we should focus on. So it's no surprise that it's number one. This area covers promoting responsible growth, priority infill areas, execution of our comprehensive plan, and then encouraging affordable, diverse, and quality communities. These metrics that I have associated with it were trending down, but that's one of the reasons we really need to focus on it, because our community is telling us something is going on here and we need to develop strategies to continue to work in this vital area. Some of the goals in this focus area have to do with prioritizing investment to ensure that we're maximizing the delivery of city services, that we're implementing the goals in the comprehensive plan, that we're utilizing tools in order to make sure that development might pay its proportionate share of services. There's a housing affordability options piece. And again, that one is really about what we make of it, the strategies that live underneath it, because this plan, with these goals will truly be defined by the strategies and the action items and the tactics and the metrics that are developed underneath these broad goals, right? So, and that's where we'll go back in the next phase in the departments and develop those key components and those strategies underneath these 5 goals. So broadly, that's what those goals are. And again, you know, I know we got comments on a few of these things, so I'll try to hold them till the end. I want to make sure we get through all of these and discuss them in detail. And the final one is assuring design standards to ensure quality communities with a diversity of amenities. Transportation infrastructure. This is about listening to our citizens' desire for a connected community, partnering and potentially using resources to move projects, pathways, sidewalks, and a safe multimodal approach to transportation challenges. Again, some of these metrics come from the community survey. Others are related to accomplishing our priority projects and increasing safe lighting to schools. Some of the goals, the first one related to transportation projects, that could involve a variety of different techniques and strategies on that. But again, the strategies will help define what these goals are in action. So I know some of those conversations have came up in discussions with council, but we'll talk in more detail if desired. So we're also going to be planning and advocating for road and sidewalk improvements to increase accessibility to key areas of community interest, enhancing our pathway network for connection points, and then investing in street lighting and overall safety and walkability in neighborhoods. Business and economic vitality. This is about revitalizing our downtown, growing in areas that are designed to support business expansion, and then targeting industries based on an industry analysis to ensure family wage job creation. Some of the goals, they're related to, again, aligning with our industry analysis, pursuing specific industries to provide a balanced economic base, supporting business development that allows to bring more people to live and work in Meridian, utilizing specific tools to try and cluster development in certain areas, pursuing development types in downtown to improve overall quality of life, and then figuring out what happens in downtown after the end of the urban renewal district. Again, variety of topics that can be discussed in that area and strategies. But again, these are those high level goals that those strategies that our departments will develop will flesh out. Public health and safety. This one's about maintaining and investing the great work of public works, police, and fire, providing time-sensitive services in water and wastewater, evaluating the environmental impacts and using data to inform, partnering with our health community to ensure access of care. And you can see the metrics that we selected for that. The goals, some of these are going to relate to investing in technology with drinking water quality, clean water, reducing the impact on the environment, engaging in our neighborhoods for public safety resources, investing in police property crime, traffic safety, enhanced education, prevention efforts. And then for fire, loss of life and property, outcomes of response, enhanced public education. And then working with our healthcare providers to ensure access to care. And, more can be fleshed out on that as well. But, that's the goals for public safety and health. Vibrant, sustainable community. These are some of the many reasons that people want to live and raise a family here, is that quality of life piece with vibrant, sustainable community. So sustainable places and spaces, sustainable practices, vibrant parks and recreational offerings, and then all art and cultural opportunities. And some of the goals here, those amenities that, we love, and our community loves, instituting sustainable and sustainable environmental practices, and then identifying public spaces, program offerings, and then preserving our heritage and identity by partnering with our community stakeholders. Government excellence. This is a lot of this has have to do with, how are we doing this as a body and as a government. And this is really about how we're doing business internally and how we're outreaching to our community. So open, transparent, and approachable government, utilizing our care values, telling our story, and engaging with our employees to deliver efficient and valuable government services, and being a great resource steward of our resources. So this one's about accountability and transparency, utilizing people's voice in their decision-making process, pursuing solutions by our elected officials in areas of education, transportation, and other government, empowering our employees to innovate operations and improve processes, utilizing data, and exemplifying service by investing in our employees and career path opportunities. So what's next? So we can adopt the strategic framework, hopefully. Some of the next steps we'd like to take would be educating our external partners and our citizens on the strategic framework, get some of their input on it. If the framework's adopted, we can then move into the next phase where we identify our strategic initiatives and our action items and our tactics to achieve those over the next few months. And then in January, I hope to begin plan implementation on our next 5-year strategic plan. And I know that was a lot of stuff. Any questions?
Thank you, Vincent. Council, any questions for Vincent at this time? Or comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
Yeah, I have a comment, and I don't think it will surprise Vincent, because I told him I was going to probably make the comment. I think this is great. I think this is a huge improvement on the last strategic plan. I really love the direction it's going overall. The one thing kind of keeping me up at night, and I'd be curious what kind of public feedback we get on it, is the focus area of responsible growth. And I think, with 41% saying is the city managing its growth wisely, the one strategic goal I think might merit a discussion, or let's just see what the feedback from the public is, but would be, do we want to have a goal about ensuring growth happens in a way that we're still maintaining adequate public services, or some way of sort of talking about techniques of managing our growth and exploring those. I'd like to see the feedback, I think, from people and our stakeholders. I am concerned with how that trend is pretty negative, and I just hope that these goals go far enough in meeting the concern. So that's the one comment I have. Overall, I think it's fantastic. Like I said, I think it's heading in the right direction, but that's one concern I have.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Kavanagh.
Vince, appreciate the presentation. Appreciate your work on engaging council on this process. Like Councilmember Strader, I think we're putting together a much better product than kind of our previous strategic plan. There is hesitation maybe isn't the right word. The piece that I kind of still continue to struggle with is that the goals are somewhat subjective. And what I like with specific goals is that we can all collectively agree when we've achieved them. When there's subjective goals, it leaves the interpretation if we've actually achieved them up in the air, and it may change from one person to one person. And so I always struggle with that piece, because I know I've sat when somebody said, well, we did all these subjective goals, and I find myself saying, well, yeah, well, did you really? Or you may have done a piece of it and you're claiming victory. I just don't know if you can share any conversations that have occurred about moving goals from being kind of nebulous and subjective to being more specific.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Cavanagh, I think that's a great and valid point. As I kind of alluded to, I think the clarity you're seeking and what you're talking about will be developed in the strategies underneath each one of these goals, right? And on some of those areas that might be more nebulous and might be a little more might be a little more nebulous or need a little bit of feedback, maybe those are some areas in which we gather some additional feedback from our citizens, or we utilize our subject matter experts on some of those things. But again, the goals are a little bit broad and nebulous on purpose, because they enable our departments and subject matter experts to go and create. And I will go hold them accountable to the fact that, tell me how we're going to measure success in these key areas, right? And so the strategies and initiatives and the action items and the tactics are what makes these strategic goals truly, to be basically held accountable to those pieces and to clarify them, right? The goals are kind of those squishy things, but I do believe that in the process of creating a strategy or a tactic or a strategic initiative underneath these, it will clarify what success looks like under each one, if that makes sense.
Councilman Cavanagh, if I could at least give my 2 cents a little bit. I don't think in this strategic plan you're going to have a mission accomplished banner. This is to me, this is like building a home, and I say that, or building a family. You have a plan for your family. You know what you want. You know where you're going to go, but you're never done doing it, and you're never going to get up and say, we've accomplished everything that we wanted for our kids and family or whatnot. But maybe that's a horrible analogy, but that's really what this is about. These are what we're going to strive to become, and we will have specific action items that we set out to do. But at the end of the day, are we going to get up there and say that this strategic plan or this goal was hit and we are done and mark it off the board and we're not going to work on that? I don't think you're going to see that from this plan.
Well, Mr. Mayor, to that point, that does cause a little bit of hesitation, because I think speaking specifically to kind of some of Councilmember Strader's comments about goals around growth, I feel like that we have a certain obligation to, as we build a strategic plan, to communicate to the public, these are the things that we're going to do to address that. These are the specific things that we're going to.
And those will be the strategies. But you're never going to say that we've accomplished responsible growth. Check the box. We're done. That's where I'm going towards. At this level where you're seeing on this plan, you're not going to see a done box checked element. The strategies maybe, and the strategies tell you kind of where you're going to go and what you're going to do, and you may say, yeah, we successfully did that item. But at the end of the day, did you accomplish the overall goal and you check it off? No. These are probably all ongoing throughout the next 5 years.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burt.
A very important document. Having this strategic plan is so important, obviously, to what we do and how we do it. I thought at the beginning that it would be very difficult to get consensus. Anytime you have 7 elected officials, involved in a project, for the record, not at the same time, that would create a quorum. So we weren't not there all the time. But also when you have, the entire leadership team of the city, there's just a ton of opinions, and I think that Vincent did probably, the best job that he could with what he was working with, to be honest. But at the end of the day, my question is simple. I mean, Mr. Mayor, this is your plan. Do you feel comfortable with it? And is there anything in it that you, what are your concerns, or do you not have any concerns, or are you comfortable with what this looks like?
Thank you, Councilman Byrne, because I think to your point, you always try to create a plan that transcends bodies to the best of your ability. But at the same time, I will serve for at least 3 to 5 years of this plan, and it definitely has my fingerprints on the plan about what I felt like I heard from the community and what I feel is comfortable, but it also incorporates what I think we heard from council and others. So yes,
It should.
and I think it also is much more. If you want to compare it to the last plan, we definitely have places where the police and fire really, I think, have a home in this plan. When the last plan, they didn't have that element. So I do feel like it covers a lot of bases. It's a great framework for where we want to go, and it talks about what we want to achieve. And we'll see what strategies we can put together to achieve those goals, because that's, again, we're all about the goals. This is where we are and what we're reviewing. Focus areas and goals. These are not the strategies of how we will get there, and that really goes to what Councilman Schrader and Councilman Kavner talked about, is what does that mean and how does that look? But there's flexibility for the departments, and there's flexibility for, quite frankly, the council. You guys can develop your own strategies. This doesn't have to be just the departments coming up with their plans. I would love council to develop strategies under responsible growth. Let's hear them.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
maybe just a quick question on the process. So it seems like the strategic initiatives are going to be really important to some of the council members. So will those also come before us as this is more fleshed out, or what does that sort of look like?
Vincent, from a certain standpoint, no, they won't come from council for approval. You will hear about those either from updates from Vincent that he'll give on the strategic plan, or from the departments, as they develop these through their yearly updates to council. But I think as we develop the strategies, I think that there'll be information will be shared with council, but we won't ask for your adoption or your sign off on those strategies. But there will definitely be information shared about them once they're developed. And of course, you're welcome to help create your own strategies from that standpoint.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Vincent and everyone that worked on this. It's a very good framework. I think it captures the very critical elements that we need to be focused on. And it really does come down to those strategic initiatives. It also, that framework allows the citizens to weigh in and provide their voice to those areas that are critical to our community. So I think it's well done that way. And as you've talked about, Mr. Mayor, and others, the strategic initiatives really are the going to be the meat on the bone, if you will. This is the framework, it's the skeleton, but now the meat's going to come. And I think as our liaison to different departments and as we discuss this, it'll be interesting to see how that develops further. And I think that's where it's going to be critical. But it's well done. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Councilman Borden. I don't see his picture, but I know he had some thoughts, if he wanted to share those or if he's got his questions answered.
I think the questions have been answered. So yeah, I'm good. No questions.
So, council, what you would likely see coming back before you would be this document in a written with some narrative information that would be part of it. That's what we would actually ask council to be adopting from that standpoint moving in. Of course, we want to go out to the community first, hear what type of feedback we have. If there's really no edits, then this is what you would substantially see. If we hear a lot of feedback, then I'm sure you'll see Vincent coming back and talking about what that feedback is, and if we think we need to make modifications based upon that feedback. Vincent we talked about this, the October to December timeframe. We're not going to really have the directors of the department start working on this until we get, an approved plan. So it's not likely as clean as Vincent stated with October to December with a kickoff in January. We'll start working on the strategies once we have an adopted framework and community feedback appropriately. From that standpoint, we definitely have departments that are still trying to wrap up the last strategic plan, some elements, and Vincent plans on giving an update to you all on that here in before the end of the year. We're just going to do one final closeout with that plan. So there are still some question marks and timing issues. I don't want to give anyone expectations, but I think that's what you're looking is sometime in early 2020 before you'll see strategy from the department.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burr.
I think we're good to proceed unless other council members have concerns or questions. Okay.
The timeline makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate you all, Councilman Vincent, for undertaking this project, and the directors and everyone pitching in. Councilman Burr, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second the motion, Mr. Mayor, with maybe the question.
We have a second. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, to clarify, I believe before, I think we're going to move items 10 to 11 to our next meeting. They're scheduled at our next meeting, so I think that totally works. We're quite able to get it done this evening. So.
Great. That answers my question before I even had a chance to ask.
I have a motion second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Clerk, let us know when you're ready. Council, I will go ahead and call this meeting to order. For the record, it is September 22nd, 2020 at 6:03 p.m. We will begin this meeting with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Borton? Councilman Cavanagh? Here. Councilwoman Perot?
Here.
Councilwoman Strader?
Here.
Councilman Hoagland?
Here.
Councilman Byrne? Here. Mayor Simison?
Here. The next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll please join us in the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item on our agenda is a community invocation, which will be given this evening by Tim Pusey with Valley Shepherd Church of the Nazarene. If you'll please join us in the invocation or take this as a moment of reflection yourself. Pastor Pusey.
Thank you. Heavenly Father, we want to thank you tonight for the blessings that are ours. Thank you for the blessings of living in this wonderful community and for the way in which you've prospered us in so many ways. Thank you, Lord, for those who serve our community, our council, our mayor, the many, many who work behind the scenes, our first responders. And Lord, tonight we just ask that you would give wisdom and discernment to our council in all of the discussions and all of the decisions that are made. Father, as people of this community, I ask that you'd give us eyes to see the needs of people around us and hearts to respond to those needs with compassion and kindness and care. And we would just take this opportunity to ask you, Lord, to help us through all of the challenges of the pandemic and bring an end to it soon, Lord, here and around the globe. Father, make yourself known, lead us and guide us throughout this whole meeting this evening, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you. Mr. Clerk, do we have anyone sign up under public forum?
Mr. Mayor, we did not.
Okay. With that, we'll move into our action items this evening. Our first item is...
Hey, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry.
We need to adopt the agenda first.
Thank you. Councilman Byrne.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to make a quick little change to the agenda. I'm going to flip-flop items 5 and 6 so that Lieutenant Harper has an opportunity to speak before Mr. Miles does.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you. Yeah.
Change the agenda. I move that we adopt the agenda as
We'll keep
amended.
you very busy. Just work is really busy.
I have a motion and a second to
that's
adopt the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I understand. Pay
If
attention.
not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. There were no one who signed up under public forum. So with that, we will move on to action items. First item is a public hearing for proposed City of Meridian citywide fee schedule update. I will turn this over to Ms. Fields, I believe, or is it going to be Mr. Barton?
Mr. Mayor,
Good. Go ahead.
Councilwoman Baird.
just a heads up, your mic's kind of fading out a lot.
Okay. Jenny, is that you are you opening up the public hearing?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This evening, we have in front of you our closing of our public hearing for our citywide fee schedule update. In front of you is the list of fees that we're proposing. And upon closing of this public hearing, we will formally adopt this resolution in front of you.
Council, do you have any questions for staff regarding the proposed fee schedule?
Sir.
Okay. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to provide testimony on this item, or anybody online? Mr. Clerk, I don't know if we have anybody in our waiting room. If you'd like to provide testimony, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of the Zoom application.
Mr. Mayor, we do have someone raising their hand. Heather, I'm unmuting you. And it's not allowing me to unmute you, so I'm going to make a change and try to bring you in.
Hey, Heather, if you can unmute yourself and if you can state your name and address for the record, you'll be recognized for 3 minutes.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I just actually signed in and I just wanted to make sure this is for the Fiorenza, the development that's happening on Amity and Eagle.
No, we are doing the proposed fee schedule for things right now.
Oh, okay, I apologize, because I received a notice saying that it was going to be today at 6 p.m., so.
Yeah, we'll get to that item. We're just working our way down the agenda.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. I see no one else who would like to provide, coming forward to testify, or provide testimony on this item. So, Council, do I have a motion? Councilman Kavanagh.
Mr. Mayor, I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, Councilman Kavanagh couldn't be heard on the video at all.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Kavanagh?
Thank you, Councilmember Pro. Sorry, I realized probably my mic was muted and I didn't have Dean to slap me upside the head. So appreciate that. My motion for those watching remotely was that we close the public hearing for the proposed City of Meridian citywide fee schedule. I think Councilmember Burnt seconded the motion.
That is true. Councilman Burnt seconded.
I'll second it again.
Seconded again, clearly stated on the record. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes
Mr. Mayor,
have it. Councilman Kavanagh.
I move we approve Resolution 20-2230.
Mr. Mayor, second that.
I have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 20-2230. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The resolution is agreed to. Okay. Next item up is a public hearing for Bakery Apartments, page 2020-0065. I'm going to.
Mr. Mayor. Yeah, same heads up. Can't hear.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Lower the.
your mic worked perfectly during the work session and now it's not working. So I don't know if there was a setting that was changed or something in between.
Yeah, we're lowering the volume level in the room. So hopefully that will allow it to work better. So, are you able to hear me now? Okay. Next item up is a public hearing for Victory Apartments, page 2020-0065. This has been requested to be withdrawn. I don't know if we have any city staff who's going to want, Cameron, if you or a member of your team was going to speak to this item or not, or if we just need a motion to withdraw.
Mr. Members of the council, that's all you need to do is have a motion to withdraw and vote to accept that.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burke.
I move that we withdraw application H-2020-0065.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Kavanagh.
second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to withdraw the application. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Borton?
Aye.
Kavanagh?
Aye.
Perot?
Aye.
Strader?
Aye.
Hoagland?
Aye.
Burnt? Aye.
All ayes, and the application is withdrawn. Next item is the public hearing for Friends Plaza, TECC 2020-0002. I'm going to go ahead and open this public hearing. Again, I don't know if we have any staff online that's going to speak to this item.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burr.
If staff is not online to speak, I think that what the can you guys hear me okay? I hear you guys. You guys hear me?
You're good.
So I think what the applicant is wanting to do is just continue this to the 29th, which is next Tuesday. I think we're going to have a special meeting next Tuesday in order to hear this. It'll be quick. I think it's pretty straightforward. But I do believe there's people that want to speak, obviously, that are online. So.
Yeah, this was postponed because they did not post the site
Correct.
appropriately. So I'll turn to Mr. Neri if we should even take any comments for the public who are online.
So, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, yeah, we did send the notices. So the person who spoke earlier said they received it. They did receive a mailed notice, but it wasn't posted properly, so it can't be heard tonight, and we can't take testimony. So it does have to be moved to next week, which now it has been properly noticed.
Okay, so for those that are on the call, hopefully you understood that. Unfortunately, we cannot take any public comment on this item, but there will be a hearing next week at 6 p.m. Where public testimony will be taken. So with that, do I have a motion? Councilor.
I move to continue item TECC-2020-0002.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cameron.
second motion.
And Mr. Mayor, for the record, it's next Tuesday, the 29th at 6 p.m.
Correct. I have a motion second to continue this item next Tuesday. Is there discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Thank you for those who were today, and we will hopefully see you next week. Next item, we swapped item 5 and 6. So the next item up is a department report from our police department regarding a discussion of proposed updates to ordinance provisions regarding disqualifying criminal convictions for mobile cell units and vehicle immobilization licenses. I'll turn this over to Lieutenant Harper.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'm here for a second reading or review of the mobile cells license and vehicle immobilization disqualifiers. We took a lot of feedback from you all a couple of weeks back and really changed the format, and hopefully everybody's had a chance to review this in detail, but to really I think clean up the language and make it easier for our citizens and local businesses to be able to understand. Some of the feedback we received was in regards to whether should it be just off the conviction or post incarceration. So we did add that language into the misdemeanor sections as well as the felony sections. We still kept the 5 and 10 year spread based off of misdemeanors and felonies. We also, Councilman Hoagland, is he on? I can't. I reviewed the telephone harassment charge and verified that in fact includes social media or any other electronic means. So that's covered there as well. And lastly, was in regards to misdemeanor injury to child, we did make an exception for a first-time offense on that under the misdemeanor section. The only challenge with adding this much detail into this, for me, will be having to track down when incarceration dates were completed. Legal did a really good job. Emily did a great job of putting this together, and I think it reads very clean. I think it'll be clear to the public, but it will cause us a little more work on the back end on verifying that, but I think it's worth it for the safety of our community. And I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Council, any questions?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Burn.
It's always an awkward conversation, to have someone from the community who's been denied a request to hear their story and justification. So I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and so I want to thank Lieutenant Harper and Emily Kane from legal for coming together and really figuring out a more effective and fair policy that will help folks do business in our city and sell certain offerings. So thank you so much. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
And Harper, appreciate your work on this. I guess a question for you about kind of the applicant side. Do these changes, in your opinion, make the application easier for when applicants are filling it out to understand, the information that we're asking of them? I know in the past we sometimes have had some confusion from some of the folks who came to appeal because they didn't feel like they fully understood the application. I assume if this is passed that you'll kind of revamp the application and work with the clerk's office, and just want to make sure that when the public's filling it out that they've got a good understanding as to what we're looking at and how I think this 4 pages of a document translates to kind of a 1-page form. So there just isn't any other confusion and puts in challenging positions for you and for the council.
Yes, I think it will. I think breaking it down into misdemeanor with subsections and felony, I think that will clean things up, and then we have the auto disqualifiers at the bottom. So I think the flow's going to work. Emily and I kind of went back on some legal jargon, but with the fact that this is an ordinance, we have to make sure that the proper language is used. And but I do think it'll clean things up. The appeal side of things, I still think on that language, we may need to clean it up a little bit on the application side. Okay. So they truly know that, look, these are strictly the only reasons you can appeal this. If you're coming just to plead your case, it's not, that's not going to meet the requirements for an appeal. And I mean, we don't want to waste the public's time, nor your guys' time or my time on having to come for an appeal if it's not even really a justified appeal. So I do think this will improve things. I also think it updates it to be more current day, because we did have a great testimony of a gentleman a while back that I think really got this thing rolling. And we've also had a couple of other denials recently that were hard for me to swallow, to be honest with you, just because of the way the ordinance read it that at the time it was so outdated. And so now I think it's much more current, and it will be a benefit for all.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for your work on this. Same to Ms. Kane.
Thanks.
Ms. Kane.
Council, any further questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
What's the next steps? What's the action needed from council on this?
Mr. Neri?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, so next steps, we will put it on to the next available agenda, which would be right now it's your October 13th agenda. So we'll have it on that for approval.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant. Council, the next item on the agenda is from the Mayor's Office, discussion of the CARES Act Small Business Grant Program update. And I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Miles and Mrs. Cleary.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Thank you for the time. And as the Mayor said, we got Victoria Cleary with Economic Development with us as well to answer questions. Can you all hear us? I see one questionable, the rest thumbs up. So let me know if you can. I'll speak up. So kind of fortuitous timing, being that it's National Small Business Week. I think that we're bringing this back in front of you with the Small Business Grant Program. So as we talked a couple weeks ago, we did reach out to the state, submitted this draft concept based on conversations that we had with you all. The state has provided feedback, general support, and supportive of the document. In fact, gave us some good comments that they appreciated the layout and the structure of the document and the detail that was in it. What I plan to do is go over a few of the changes, because I know in the packet I had submitted a packet to you all on Wednesday, I believe, and by Thursday afternoon, we had heard back from the state some additional things. So I wanted to walk through a few minor changes that are in a document, and I'll share my screen here. We'll walk through those changes. I think you can all see the screen now. See a head nod, so that's good. We'll walk through those changes briefly. So real quick, I know Councilman Borton and possibly some others, but I heard a question from Councilman Borton last week regarding who specifically within the city will be working through this and managing the program to address sort of the risk element. Right here in section 2, and this kind of dovetails, we had originally proposed to have a consultant work through the application process while we were talking with the state. Victoria was also talking with a potential consultant. Long and short of it is that the consultant's business model and what they were proposing wasn't fitting with exactly what we needed. And we did talk with the state about allowable resources within the city, which we knew we had to use anyway. So Crystal Campbell in CDBG, we are proposing that she will do an initial review. If you recall, we proposed to send these grant applications through the Neighborly software system, which is a component that we will have built, and I'll let Victoria speak to that piece. But Crystal would review the applications. And so what you see in 2.0 in the first paragraph, that's what now refers to potential staff salary, because the administrative expenses up to $50,000 can be utilized for those expenses that are directly related to staff time for COVID expenses, which reviewing these applications is a direct activity of that. To Mr. Borton's question, once Crystal reviews it, it's proposed to come in front of Victoria, myself, as well as the CFO and a member from the Chamber of Commerce. We haven't identified that person specifically, but there's a member from the chamber. It's likely going to be 1 or 2 or 3 different folks with an accounting background to review the recommendation that comes from Crystal and to then make a decision. And then there is 2 more additional layers from a risk perspective and sort of a review perspective. One, we do still have the agreement between the city and the applicant that's proposed to be signed, that was worked through the legal department. And finally, once all of that process is conducted, this list gets resubmitted to the state, and the state does have a final review to be conducted to say, yes, they see what we're submitting, they see the rationale, the justification, and they also approve the list. So that's sort of one change, and I think addresses one question that had come up around the risk component. Second change is in section 2.2. So in your packet of information, there were about 9 bullet points in this section here that addressed what were really redundant things in some areas. There were also some things around business salaries, employee salaries, and payroll expenses. In conversations with the state, which I had shared a response from the state with you all, that the state does not recommend any payroll expenses be covered, does not recommend any salaries from businesses be covered. And ultimately, at the end of the day, at least in our reading of the guidance, part of that logic stems from the state is responsible to verify the proper use of these funds. And in our mind, their recommendation holds weight in that regard, because they have to determine at the end of the day, was it used for the right expense? And if they're not supportive of payroll expenses, we felt that that wasn't necessarily the right thing to ask for. And so we're structuring 2.2 in terms of eligible use of funds to stick directly with what the state has recommended in their small business grant program. So it's a reimbursable program for personal protective equipment, inventory equipment, rent, and utilities. And so that's the second change. And then lastly, the third change, which is really administrative, we updated the attachment, I believe it's B, which is the state's form that's required to be part of this program, which an applicant would also complete and submit. They made a few minor changes. The most significant change on their form is at the bottom of page 2, where they outline this, I don't know if it'll highlight, but this grant purpose. And this really speaks to the reimbursement aspect of this program, that the state wanted to see that it is reimbursable expenses for equipment, inventory, PPE, rent, utilities. So they added that change to the form. So we simply updated the form as an attachment. And those are the 3 major changes that you see compared to your packet versus what's on the screen. So I wanted to highlight those 3. Maybe I'll stop there, because I know there was a lot of conversation around this the last time we were here. Ultimately, the proposal is to allocate up to $1 million worth of funding for small businesses who could apply for $10,000 grant reimbursements on their applications to the city. So I'll stop there. Tori, if you have any additional comments from a software component or a CDBG staffing review component, happy to let you chime in as well. And I'll turn.
Not at this time. I think I'll wait to see if council has any specific questions.
Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Dave, Tori, thanks for your outreach over the past week to kind of help address some of my questions. I think you guys have, both this document and our conversations have helped to address some of the concerns that I had. A couple of follow-ups, though. Dave, you mentioned in your presentation that there's a department within the state that is going to be verifying that these funds have been spent correctly. Who is that within the state? And then do we have like a timing of kind of like when we're all clear that any risk of the city being obligated to repay funds will have passed? I mean, do they have to review this within 12 months, 24 months, 5 years? Do we know anything about that?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Councilman Cavanagh, those are good questions. So first, to your point about who at the state controller's office reviews the submitted list from the state, or excuse me, from the city. So they'll review the application as a sort of a packeted list. What we're proposing is we would review applications on a weekly basis, compile a list at the end of the week and submit that to the state as a package. So the state controller's office is the reviewer. To your point about time of risk, I will defer to Mr. Neri a little bit, but this is where it gets into a little bit of federal funding and the risk associated with it. In our interpretation of looking at the guidance and working with the legal department, there are provisions in the U.S. Treasury guidance that state the agency receiving the funds, so in this case, the state, is responsible to administer those funds properly. Now, I will tell you that the state controller's office, in the email that I sent off to you all, they turned around and said that the city is ultimately responsible. So I think that's probably a battle maybe for Councilman Borden and Mr. Neri, you know, in the world of the legal realm of arguments in that regard. But again, we do feel that we've addressed the legal risk between the legal agreement that we're requiring between the city and the applicant, as well as the fact that we've got the state in partnership working with us, looking at the applications. Our guidance is following that state guidance as well. And Councilman Cavanagh, real quick, I don't have an answer for you on timing. How far away in the future could the state or the feds come back? We could certainly work to get that answer for you if you prefer. Don't have it at this time.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Pearl.
Thank you, Dave and Tori. I really appreciate the update on this. I feel like it was very well written. I was really happy with how easy it is to understand for members of our public, for sure. And just curious if there's been any word on whether there's going to be an extension for these applications past the end of the year.
Mr. Mayor and Councilwoman Perot, at this point, haven't heard from the federal level. I know that the talks that addressed this time frame were part of the second round of the CARES Act funding, which have kind of stalled out and then just now recently started to re-engage. It's tough to talk about what we're hearing. We had originally heard that, yes, they were proposing to push that out, but the conversations have stalled. And so I don't want to give false pretenses about what they may or may not do at the federal level. Right now, we know it's through December 30. Tori, I don't know if you have additional information on that topic or not.
No, that's what I've heard. Yeah, just December 30 for now.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
Just a couple of questions. I was curious about if the controller's office thinks it's absolutely necessary to have the DUNS number as part of the application. Yeah, that's a private service. I understand the purpose of it is to track, you know, the identity and credit history of your business, but at the same time, there is a cost associated with getting them. Like I have intentionally not gotten them for some of my businesses. So I just was curious if we have to require that And I was also just curious in general if CARES Act funding could be used to reimburse childcare expenses, which is another challenge that businesses and the community are facing.
Mr. Mayor and Councilwoman Strader, maybe the second question first. Child care expenses under this program, we have been told by the state not to reimburse businesses for those costs. So that's one aspect. Tori, I know, and I'll let you jump in, you've talked with several daycares about what about daycare businesses as an expense who provide childcare. But I do know that this program is not promoted by the state to cover specific childcare costs. And that was one of the questions we asked as well of the state. Tori, do you have any information on the childcare?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Strader, we are exploring using our CDBG CARES Act allocation. We had asked if we can kind of funnel that money into the hands of the people who really need it through potential childcare providers who would then verify that a family would qualify under CDBG regulations. But we were told that is not possible. So we are reaching further out. We already do give scholarships to the Boys and Girls Club. We're reaching out to the YMCA, and also the State Department of Health and Welfare has a child care grant program. And so we're looking to see if we can maybe enhance that program as well.
And then Mr. Mayor and Councilwoman Strader, on the DUNS number, what we have been told by the state is yes, it's required. It's part of the federal granting process. And I don't know, Tori, if you've had any updated information on that. I know there's been a lot of conversation with the chamber about that.
Yeah, I don't believe there's a cost through the link that is provided through the state forms. I don't believe there's a cost associated with that for this purpose.
Okay, thank you. It's unfortunate that the state is taking this view on the childcare expenses, especially, I think. It's just one of the biggest challenges that people are facing right now. And it just seems so tone deaf not to include that. But thank you for exploring it.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Strader, you're welcome. And I know we hear that and we echo that and have worked with the state, and if it's the direction of this body, continue to work with the state. And I think the more voices that the state hears on those needs, the better.
Council, any further questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Borton.
Dave, is the application for our municipal grant program, does that mirror what other cities are doing for theirs, or is ours unique for some reason, and why?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Borton, the specific application process, I would say, mirrors Boise, Nampa, and Garden City closely. They are all slightly different. We propose to have an online component similar to Nampa, Boise, Garden City. I can tell you Garden City takes an approach of strictly utilizing the Idaho form, the IDA 20 that I showed you in the attachment, and that's all they require. Boise, similar to us, are proposing to have an electronic website that has data collection, sign off of that form, and then moving forward. So I don't know if that addresses your question, but generally we're all in alignment with the information being asked for.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Borton.
Well, just follow-up examples. So when ours asks for, P&Ls and maybe some declaration of the impact, what does that matter to us necessarily? So, for example, if I'm the business and I'm applying and I say if it's an eligible expense, what does it matter what my P&L is? Why am I submitting profit and loss? Do I have to lose a certain percentage of money over year? And if that doesn't matter, why are we asking for that kind of stuff?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Borton. Tori, do you want to address that question?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Borton. The eligible expenses have to be directly tied to COVID impacts. So a profit and loss statement will help us see that, these were their expenses, say in the first quarter of the year. so that we can legally reimburse for those expenses that are our direct impact of COVID and regulations, distancing requirements, things like that. Yeah. And that's likely one of the reasons that the state prefers to pull out payroll. You know, we specifically asked the question, what if an employee is assigned to, you know, say do occupancy counts or, you know, enhanced cleaning protocols? And we were told no, simply because it's difficult to quantify.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
like when you put up the list that was up there a moment ago of eligible expenditures, that I think it's the new shorter list there, kind of cleaner. So if somebody were to apply and it's just equipment, I guess, if equipment is it, and they say that they had to buy X machine and it's due to COVID. Where else is that the grant request details, I guess, that where they're going to have to describe and justify, say, in narrative format, I bought this equipment because, I don't know, I spent money on COVID expenses, so I don't have any more money left, so now I can't afford the equipment. I don't know. But I mean, how do you flesh that out? That was some of my concern when assessing the city's risk. Some of that mushy subjective stuff seemed to be challenging for us to be able to draw lines.
So, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Borton, yes, you know, we did align the eligible use of funds section 2.2 with the state because of that. What we heard, the concern around the mushiness. I think to the questions around the risk, the reason the application requests the information, such as the profit and loss, and such as the, you know, justifying sort of a narrative of what they're using the expenses for, are exactly to address that risk, so that the city is able to make a sound judgment of the use of the funds. To your point about utilizing funds because they spent them elsewhere, the way the federal grants are working around this is that these funds cannot be utilized for purchases that have already received funds. So I'll use an example of, you brought up equipment. So if they have purchased COVID-related equipment and now they're purchasing, or excuse me, requesting dollars for COVID-related equipment, that's going to have more scrutiny and likely not be eligible because it's a area of under the CARES Act funding that they've already received funding for. So that's the understanding that we as the reviewing body, as a city, need to understand, so that we're not wrongly granting dollars to a business that already received money for equipment when they're asking for equipment.
Okay, one last question, Mr. Mayor. I
important.
Might be confused myself on the sequence of events. There's reference, I guess, in the application, it talks about a reimbursement request, which sounds like I've made the expenditure. Now I want a grant to reimburse me for that COVID-related cost that I've incurred. And then the attachment B talks about how has COVID affected your business and your planned use of the funds, as though I'm going to request prior to having the expenditure. So am I the business spending money and then I'll apply to get reimbursed, or do I apply prior to spending in hopes I get a grant funded?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Borton, another good question, which has been a change since we talked to you last. The state's recommendation is to work only off of a reimbursement platform. In attachment B, this is the Idaho form. So I think that their narrative is trying to address multiple perspectives, but their recommendation to us has been now funding reimbursements only.
What you have on the screen is different than what's in the packet. That's what may be causing my.
So is this listed as attachment B that's now shown?
No, but you scroll down right there.
Yeah, so this page, this is still part of the Idaho State Form. And I don't know that they have kept up with their recommendation to stick with a reimbursement only approach.
Okay.
And we're required by their program to provide this form as completed as part of this program.
Okay, but it's reimbursement only, not proactive.
Correct. That's the proposal.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
just a general comment or question. I'm not sure who to direct it to, but maybe Mr. Miles. But if because of the way the state has narrowly defined this program, we end up finding out that businesses really aren't just using it. It's not practical. There aren't enough expenses eligible. And we have alternatives to use CARES Act funding. You know, can we pivot into other programs? Is there a certain timing for this program when it will end anyway? Or how are we thinking about that timing element?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Schrader, as we have it right now, following the state's guidelines, this would go through December 30th. And in our mind, from a program administration standpoint, that would likely mean a few weeks into January to allow for accounting, paperwork, and things of that nature. My understanding is that as a body, if we came back and made a recommendation to either cease or change or alter this program, we could do that as well as a body through you with recommendations and discussions. And so we could make that pivot. And that is a concern that we talked about as a group coming back to you after talking with the state is it is very locked down in terms of these defined uses and reimbursements. And what activity are we going to get? I think the reality is we just don't know what we're going to get. I can share with you last week, early on, I spoke with a local participating city, I think it was Garden City, and they had upwards between 40 and 50 applications in their first 2 weeks. So they're getting application flow. They certainly didn't approve all of those, but they were getting application flow. So I think in answer to your question, yes, there is flexibility. We can adjust. It would really just take us coming back and we could monitor this use and this fund and this program and give you weekly reports or whatever frequency you so desire.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Pro.
Dave, I think we touched on this a little bit in the last time you presented, but I want to go over it again. What the plan is for getting the word out to the local businesses of this grant program. I mean, obviously, we'll likely use social media as a city. The chamber will probably be involved, but can you go over what some specifics are of how we let it be known to our public that this is available to them and how active that's going to be?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Councilwoman Pro, I will turn this over to Tori, who has put in great efforts to already make some strides in that realm. So, but yes, you're touching on all the right points.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Perot. Yeah, we're already working with Shandy in the communications office. Again, we'll work with the chamber as well. We'll get the word out through the Idaho Women's Business Center, the Small Business Development Center at BSU, Department of Commerce, Boise Metro Chamber, and the Southwest Idaho Manufacturing Association, and any other business associations. We also have a list of restaurants in Meridian that are licensed, and so maybe we can work with the chamber to do a specified mailing to them. Yeah, so we'll do what we can to get the word out, and I know Shandy's planning to do press releases. And then ideally what we'd really like to do as we encounter businesses who take advantage of this grant program and are successful, maybe highlight them through a social media post, things like that.
Council, any further questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Burr.
I guess, oh, go ahead.
What's the plan if we accept or we have more applications than we can handle one given time.
Is your question meaning if we find that there's $2 million worth of businesses out there that submit that are all eligible, or that we just don't have the manpower to review the applications because there's so many right up front?
Second.
Work late. Mr. Miles is committed to working 24 hours a day to review all the applications if we need to. So, I mean that aspect, that's what we will do. I mean, if we get more, we'll just invest the time.
Mr. Mayor and Councilman Burt, I only chuckle because the conversations we've had with staff, everybody has expressed, and certainly the council, even at the last meeting, you did talk about staff impact. People recognize it. I've also seen a great willingness to help the community out. So I think, to the mayor's point, we will work tirelessly to get what needs to be done.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burt.
I have no doubt that we have dedicated employees that will, when asked upon, will step up and do what they've been asked to the best of their abilities, and will do the best work possible. I don't think there's a member of this council that doubts that for a second, to be honest with you. But what concerns me is taking responsibilities away from Corey, for example, and having her not spend as much time out doing what she does. And I know that we're in a busy time right now, and I know there's a lot of people pulling her in different directions, and then we add this to her plate, and I'm just using her example. I know that there's many more that will be involved as well. So I just hope that there's a plan in place, other than we're going to work 24 hours a day until we figure this out. I know that you're not being serious, but it concerns me a little bit that this is going to take up a lot of time.
I won't tell you how much time it will take up because we don't know, but at the same time, I would rather invest Tori's time at saving existing businesses than searching businesses that may or may not choose to come here. And if that's how she's got to reprioritize her time, she's just as an example, I can free up Dave Mile. I can manage the time. Crystal's is the one that I'm most concerned about, just because she has certain other obligations under CDBG, which are time sensitive. But until we see what the influx is, I don't think we can truly, I don't want to say we're not prepared, but it's really hard to project what that looks like and even how much time it will take.
And Mr. Mayor and Councilman Burt, there are administrative dollars set aside, so we can continue to have the conversation about if consulting help is needed, what does that look like? Who could it be? If, again, the one we initially identified didn't work out, but are there others as well? So again, I think we have the nimble ability to continue to work to find that. And to the mayor's point, we don't know what the impact is yet either.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Perot.
And I guess in that regard, as Tori has spoken with all these different organizations that she will be presenting or sharing the grant program with, have you had any feedback from them about how many members of their organization would be interested in, the Meridian Business Downtown Association? Have you heard anything from any of these groups that they feel like that their members will be benefited by this? Are we getting any kind of initial sort of idea of level of interest?
Mr. Mayor and Councilwoman Perot, our chamber has indicated that, they feel like there will be robust interest from the small business community members that they're in touch with, the Downtown Business Association as well. So we'll see. I talked to Nampa this week, and they had about 4 dozen applications in their first 2 weeks. Now, again, all those, didn't necessarily qualify. And I feel like the program being reimbursement based, does significantly not only mitigate the city's risk, but it also, probably cuts down on the number of applications. It's unfortunate that some needs won't be met because the program is structured like this, but it's an important opportunity in our recovery for our small business community, and the staff will do whatever it takes to administer the program and get the money back out into the community and contribute to business stability and recovery.
And I would go as far as to say that I guarantee there's 7 elected officials that if we can help roll up our sleeves and we have the skills and qualities to put in an hour or 2 helping, and I'm sure people would all do that if we had the skills and abilities and knowledge. So if there's that need and we need to do all hands on deck, we will reach out and look for people that are willing to help keep our current businesses operating.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Kavanagh.
Just think that this goes back to, I think, a lot of the conversations that occurred with council when this whole pandemic started, which is we really trust that you're making the operational decisions that meet the needs of our city. I agree with Councilmember Burton, probably all 7 of us was worried about any of our city employees being overworked or overtaxed. But you know what's going on in this building better than any of us. You know the priorities of our city. And to your point, if this helps to keep some businesses from having to close up shop in place of recruiting new businesses, I think that's good direction, something I always support. I had some concerns about this early on, but I've come around on it. I appreciate the direction and guidance and information from your staff. I don't see any reason why we need to slow this down. So thanks for your work on it, everyone.
Yeah. Councilman Perot.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to say, I echo your sentiment. I mean, I work 2 jobs, but this is such a critical thing for our community in the long term and in the big picture. So I'm happy to help out where possible. I had the opportunity to use the Neighborly software as part of the CDBG application committee, and it's very easy to use, and it's an awesome program. I'm glad that we're getting to expand it. Just really a huge asset to actually approving the applications. It'll help to move through them really quickly, I think. So I just wanted to give kudos to the staff that they're trying to find a software system that will help move through things, decision making quickly, because it seems like to me that will be a big benefit that will be helpful in accommodating maybe some challenges with enough staffing.
Thank you. Council, anything further? Okay. He shook his head no, so he's unmuted, but he did not.
Nope, no more.
Do you have anything else? Okay.
No.
Council Ward.
Nope.
Okay. Well, Council, we will be moving forward with this program. No formal action is required from you at this time. This will just be part of a budget amendment at some point in time in the future for any of the CARES funding expenses that need a budget amendment to be covered. So thank you, and we'll monitor the program, and if we need more hands, we'll let you know. And if we run out of money because of such interest, we'll come back and let you know what that is as well. So thank you very much, Dave and Tori, for all your work on this, and let's move forward.
Thank you.
With that, Council, we've come to item number 7 on our agenda, which is ordinance number 20-1896. I will add the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an ordinance amending Meridian City Code as codified at Title 11, pertaining to specific use standards in Chapter 4, public hearing process in Chapter 5, and subdivision design and improvement standards in Chapter 6, and providing for a waiver of the reading rules and providing an effective date.
Council, you've heard this item read by title. Is there anyone who would like it read in its entirety? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Perot.
I move that we adopt ordinance number 201896, the suspension of rules.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 20-1896 under suspension of the rules. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The ordinance is adopted. Are there any items under future meeting topics?
Mr. Mayor. Not a future meeting topic, but the woman who spoke earlier, Heather, is still on the line. I know we had some audio issues, so I didn't know if you wanted to address what we did earlier with that application.
Heather, do you, let's go ahead and wrap up the meeting, then we can leave it open and speak to her afterwards.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a discussion, anything else? If not, I'll take a motion for adjournment. Councilman Burnt.
Move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second the motion?
I have a motion second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we are adjourned.
Good night, everybody.
Aye.
Chris, do you want to?
Aye.
Heather, we're bringing you in now.
Heather, do you have a question?
No, not really. I'll just be here next Tuesday. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Yep, thank you. Have a good night.
You too.